Welcome to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine presented by the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. My name is Joe Thomas, but there are deeper things, more substantive things that run consistently through everything we do, including the idea of internet control. And joining us first up this week is Christie-Lee McNally, Executive Director of Free Our Internet. Christie-Lee, thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. And, thank you for what you're doing, because there are a million moving parts, it seems, in the discussion over the free internet, from everything from the trolls that will turn around and say, well, you didn't build that. This was government in the first place, and the government's just letting you use it, to people who say, no, the government wants to turn it into a utility just like the electric companies, and then everybody will have it, and everything in between. And so, first and foremost, talk a little bit about what brought you to create Free Our Internet.
Well, what started the whole thing is I was actually the statewide director for the Trump campaign in Maine during the last election cycle. And I was seeing a lot of people on the conservative side being banned or being put in, Twitter jail. And, people were coming to me and saying, my posts are being removed. Mm-hmm. I can't, get my stuff up on, Facebook. And I was seeing an increasing amount of that type of thing happen. And after the election, and I was finding a little time on my hands, and I said, I need to do something about this. This is happening far too often. And, and Google and Facebook and Twitter all seem to have this monopoly where they can, squelch out basically the free speech of the conservative right. And there needs to be a group, and people need to band together so that we can, let people know that they're not the only ones that this is happening to, and start pushing back. Mm-hmm. On Google had a revolving door in the Obama administration. They created a lot of the policies that for the internet, with the Title II classification of the ISPs, but they were able to carve themselves out and left themselves completely unregulated while their competition was regulated. And in those couple of years, they became mm-hmm. gigantic. And that's why I, decided to form this group to start motivating people and start educating people on what was actually going on and how they were, shaping their agenda. And Facebook and Google and Twitter have basically they shape what we see, and that was very concerning to me.
Absolutely,
and it has become very evident over the past few months that has increased.
Well, we even saw the president's own Twitter account get shut down by somebody who apparently wasn't even a very high-ranking official at Twitter for a period of time. And you mentioned, and I'm glad you brought up Google in this and the revolving door, because if a brick-and-mortar company had behaved in the kind of monopolistic way that Google does, and then walked into the halls of government and started trying to manipulate the regulatory landscape as to keep their businesses down, there would be a hue and cry. If Ford Motor Company did this, or Walmart or anyone else did this, there'd be protest marches in the streets. But since it's Google, number one, many people don't know about it because many of us Google search our news. So, shocked I am that it didn't show up all that much in the average Google search for the news. But beyond that, it seems like it's okay. It's this magic land called the internet, and we need new rules because it's the wild, wild west out there. Are they playing us, and doing the oldest trick in the book, which is cronyism through government to make themselves more money?
Oh, absolutely. If you the numbers are staggering. During the Obama administration, there were over 200, I believe it was like over 238 employees between Google and the White House during those years. And I begged to see if you could find another company that had that many employees, go back and forth between their company and the White House.
Gee.
And they shaped the FCC. They shaped the FCC rules and regulations. They had a lot of hand in it. They absolutely made sure that they were taken care of. And and now here's what's happened is that we've paid the price for it in free speech, and other people in their competition. The tech left got very powerful in those 8 years of the Obama administration, and it's going to take some very tenacious people to put them in their place. Senator Cruz in the hearings last week, he started letting them know that he was not. He started giving them pushback. He pointed out to them he did not feel that they were neutral, and the fact that they were actively censoring speech, on their platforms was troubling to him, and he put them on notice. Which kudos to Senator Cruz, because someone needs to start pointing out to them that they can no longer get away with doing that. I mean, look what they did to Representative Blackburn. Mm-hmm. And to Rose McGowan, and she's one of their own. But because it didn't fit their agenda, they shut her down for a period of time.
And that's an important point. It's apolitical in a lot of ways. It's really more about who's with us and who's against us, and we'll take you out no matter where you fall in the political spectrum if you don't do what we want. And that's the scary thing about these kind of monopolies, Christie, is that they don't particularly care who you are. You just, as long as you're going to do what we want you to do.
No, and actually, and a lot of people, I don't know if people knew about this last week. It was scary. It was scary to me because I don't know if you use Google Drive or Google Docs. But last week, people, hundreds of users were blocked from getting their own files because Google Docs was scanned them, and it was a quote unquote another mistake, and they said violating the terms and conditions. So those were people's private documents that they kept in the quote-unquote cloud that they were no longer accessible to.
Is there
Google that had said they were violating the terms and conditions, so they no longer were able to access their own files. Now, could you imagine if you had files that you needed to access for work?
Oh, absolutely. Critical
Google
ones.
decided that they weren't acceptable. For someone who works in politics like me, that is very problematic. At that point, I was like, holy cow, that would be my, donors, that would be, my budgets, that
Mailing
would be
list,
all of the things that could possibly affect, a campaign. They talk about Russia affecting a campaign. Google could effectively shut down a campaign if that's what they're using, to share information between, campaign workers.
Well, let me ask you, let's go to that side where the hearings on top of hearings, and I can't even remember, the Warren Commission on up. I don't remember any hearings, any actually coming to any conclusions in my adult life. But as they discuss this idea that $100,000 worth of ad spending, which I think some of the testimony drove 0.4% of all the web traffic through Facebook was driven by a $100,000 purchase of some ad time from Russian operatives per se. But this ability to manipulate through very narrow corridors is certainly possible. If you're only getting your goods delivered by one road, then it's really easy to gum up that road, and it's really easy to surveil that road. If everything is going through Google, there are even Fourth Amendment discussions regarding FISA warrants and what can the government go and see if you have Google Docs, how Fourth Amendment protected are they if you've already given them to a third party, because you see the government doing that. There's a Pandora's box of things that open up as we do these things for convenience, and it seems like now all of a sudden folks like you are waking up to the problems of it. Where do we go? You mentioned Ted Cruz. Who are some of the legislative avant-garde looking to keep the internet free and loose, because I hear plenty of them saying we need to utilitize the internet. We need to make sure everybody has broadband. So we're going to create these government utilities and they'll manage the internet. And those kind of things scare me because it creates this connection between government and these Googles and Facebooks and Twitters.
Well, I think Chairman Pai actually is leading the charge to repeal the Title II classification of the internet. He definitely understands that it is not a utility, and they are in the works right now of repealing that Title II classification of the ISPs. After that, I think there needs to be, I think we need to take a look at, Google and Twitter and Facebook. I am not one for regulation, but I think what's happening, to Google and Twitter and Facebook is that they have gotten a lot of backlash, from people, and I think that's where it needs to come from. There may be some things might need to be set up. And to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure what that looks like right now. Once they repeal, the Title II classifications, I think that there needs to be some working groups and some committees to kind of take a look at, what can be done without restricting progress and, the small guys. But at the same time, you can't allow someone like Google to continue to do what they're doing. I mean, we've seen, instances where they, the sex trafficking bill, that they're on the side of the sex traffickers and back page, and they are skewing their algorithm so that when you do a search on that particular bill, all you see is why it's bad, why the bill is bad, and you're not getting the information that you need to understand, why there needs to be a bill, why there can't be a web page where you can sex traffic children, and so we need to have some things in place, but not to the point where they restrict, our freedoms. And, Senator Cruz is one person who I think understands that. And him leading the charge, I think, is a good thing because he knows how to balance freedoms with, with certain restrictions. Chairman Pai definitely understands that the internet needs to be a free and open internet. And I think those two working together probably would be, a good start. But to be honest with you, what it really needs to come from is the consumer. The consumer is the one who needs to let these people know, we're going to stop using your product. Everybody uses Google, but there are other products out there.
Sure.
There's Bing, there's DuckDuckGo. With Twitter, there's a new, there's Gab. They'll start, at the end of the day, you could look at Twitter being, MySpace in a couple of years if they're not careful.
Well, and that's the thing is that I think the marketplace will manage this, especially in the world of news aggregators, RSS feeds, and things like that are becoming so much more popular for news rather than just Google searching a topic. But it is still ubiquitous as of right now, but there are plenty of instances where that can happen. But where does Google's profit come from? It's one thing Twitter and Facebook are somewhat like broadcast radio. They come from advertisers. So you can see that. Google, it's not always as apparent who's paying for all of this. And a lot of it comes down to who gets in what did they used to call it, the golden triangle, the upper left-hand corner of your screen. The top 5 or 6 Google search sites are usually sponsored content because you've paid to have extra weight put on whatever your website or your information is.
Yeah, and they also, even if you're using other search engines, I believe they have agreements with them. Even if you don't think you're using Google, you're probably using Google at some level. I think they're pretty entrenched, in everything that we do. And then you have their Google suite of products, YouTube. I think they're pretty much, I think they make money off of everything. To be honest with you, everything you do on the internet, somehow Google makes money.
Well, and even you look at the incorporation of Google Maps into the driverless cars technology. Right. I mean, my goodness. I mean, it's like a Robert Heinlein novel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I watched that movie. Was it called The Circle? I think it was called The Circle, and that was, I go, it's Google. I swear, I'm like, this is a movie about Google, and it wasn't a very good movie, but it was. Yeah. It just reminded me. It was like I was watching it, and the more I do the research that I'm doing, and the more I look into this, and I go, geez, I just want to disconnect. I mean, they know everything, that we're doing. And we were, my son has a Google Talk in his room. And we were discussing, something that was female orientated. And on his desktop, all of a sudden he started getting these ads. And
oh my gosh,
he goes, Mom, did you know, this, and I won't repeat it because it's feminine related. And he goes, but I'm using the wrong size. And I started laughing, and I go, why would you be getting those ads? And we both looked at the Google, Home thing, and we realized that we discussed it in front of the Google Home, and sure enough, it went to his, computer and started showing up in his ads, and that's scary to me. But it's the way life is now. My Alexa goes off every now and then. I'm sitting in the kitchen, and she'll be like, "Oh, I didn't hear that," and I'm like, "Well, you weren't meant to."
Yeah, well, someone was talking about putting triggers on it, so you had to say a certain phrase to turn them on. Otherwise, they wouldn't listen. And there's a lot of Fourth Amendment protections in this. We're visiting with Christie-Lee McNally, Executive Director of Free Our Internet. Because with all of this centralization, I recall several years ago, you probably saw the story, Christy, that the year Time magazine made Mark Zuckerberg their Person of the Year. And I remember the profile, I was reading it, and I found it interesting, just as a little sidebar in the story, just kind of drops in the middle of a breakfast meeting over a foosball table or something like that, and a couple of Starbucks coffees. The head of the FBI pokes his head in and says, "Hey, Mark, I'll be down in my corner office," and leaves. And the reporter, and I'll put that in air quotes, never follows up on why the head of the FBI had an office at Facebook. But it just seemed to be, look at how, and it was included in the story as to say, look at how cool and powerful Mark Zuckerberg is. But if you think about some of the freedoms and our privacies and things like that, I don't think the American public knows how much they're doing in their front yard when they really think they're sitting in their dining room.
No, and that just runs chills up my, spine when you say that. And I have to say, last night, I was shocked how quick the shooter in Texas was scrubbed basically from the internet.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that, but I was refreshing and trying to find information last night the minute his name was released, and his Facebook profile was deleted before his name was released, and I found that very interesting. And you can find very little information about him on the internet anywhere.
Right.
And to me, that is also problematic because that leaves us with no information. And we're the American public, and if he had information out there, we should also have that information. That's not up to the government. It's not up to Facebook. It's not up to Google. That's not up to anybody else. If that information was out there, that should be information that we all should have available to us. Whether it's good or bad is not the point. And it disturbs me how quickly his information was scrubbed last night. And I don't know if you noticed how quickly, but that was very pointed last night. How Facebook. I know people who have family members who have passed away and can't get the Facebook account deactivated for years because they don't have the password. But last night his Facebook account was deactivated, before you could say boo. So that goes to show that the FBI definitely has a say over there. So no, agreed. I'm ready to move to the middle of 400 acres.
So what can we do to help you at Free? And I'll give the website again so that people know how to get to you. But what are you looking? How can we help you there at freeourinternet.org?
Well, you go to freeourinternet.org, and there's a Take Action button, and there's a couple of things you can do. What we're trying to do is, first of all, if you've been put in, Twitter jail or a Facebook timeout, we are trying to compile people's stories so that when the time comes, when they start forming legislation, when they start doing things after the Title II classification is repealed, we can go up to the Hill and share those stories. And there's a button whether you want to share your name or not. You can be completely anonymous. But what we're trying to do is show how far and wide the problem is. So that is one way you can take action. You can also send a letter to the FCC, telling them that you want to repeal the Title II classification, which is the utility part. Mm-hmm. You don't want the internet as a utility, and that's another important part, of making a free and open internet. Also, sign up, to get emails from us, so that when we have the other side is basically funded by George Soros. So they have a lot of people that show up at these, events who are paid to show up, and our people are not. Our people are working people. So when we need people to show up for rallies and stuff like that, we email. So if you sign up on our email, we'll let you know if we need you to show up someplace and be loud. And poor Chairman Pai has had, the people show up at his house and camp out in front of his house for months at this point. It's time for us to show that he has support. So that's another thing we need to do. So.
Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate your time on this, and we will continue to help fight this fight with you. And again, it's freeourinternet.org. Thank you so much, Christie-Lee, and you have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Next, we'll go over this past week's elections with Delegate Ben Klein on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.